You're listening to a podcast from thespoilist.com. Welcome to First Contact, putting the into Star Trek. I'm Andrew.
I'm James.
And I'm Alex.
This time we have been watching The Most Toys. It was written by Shari Goodharts, directed by Timothy Bond, and it first aired the week of May the 7th, 1990. James, what is this one all about?
Data is transporting a dangerous chemical required to prevent an environmental disaster on the planet of the week, when his shuttle explodes, apparently killing him. Everyone on the ship is a little shocked, but they get on with their mission like good Federation officers do. In reality, Data has been kidnapped, and his death faked by Kivas Farjo, a collector of rare artifacts lacking in moral fibre. He finds various means to persuade Data to do his bidding. Meanwhile, the crew realise that their errand of mercy wasn't a natural disaster after all, so they hunt down Data's kidnapper for the big final confrontation.
Alex, you hadn't seen this episode before. What did you think of it?
I feel like I should have liked it a lot more than I did, but I was reasonably indifferent. I mean, that sounds unfair. There were some things in it I liked, but I felt they were a bit spread out throughout the runtime. And I'll be honest, I did check back a few times and go, "Well, this is still going."
I think the thing is, it is very much... There's not a lot of plot to it. It is a man locks another man in a room and then wants him to do things. And the Enterprise plot, they don't have anything to do either. So it's a very simple setup, essentially. And I suppose how much you get into that is how much you engage with the plight of the kidnap and the kidnapper, how much you find that relationship engaging. And I think there's interesting stuff here, because it's an episode, essentially, it's about abuse. You could say it's sort of that kidnapper that locks victims in the attic, or the basement usually, for a prolonged period of time. It's a sci-fi take on that. It's about someone who wields his power, and in some ways it's about sexual abuse as well. You can certainly read that into it. But I think it is a little bit dull.
I think we can all agree that what it needed was a C-plot in which Wesley did some science project.
There's a bit going on in the Enterprise, and let's, I suppose, deal with that first. So we have everybody shocked that Data's died. Then, well, I suppose we should divide up his stuff. Oh, that seemed very sudden. Are you not going to wait till the end of this very pressing mission? No, we'll go and do it now. It's fine. Geordi, don't you have to do some stuff maybe with this really highly combustible chemical that's very dangerous? As chief engineer, do you not have to make sure that's safe? No, I'm just going to go through Data's drawers right now and say, Worf would probably want this. Yeah, does anyone want the tiny Tasha Yar statue? Anyone?
At this point, Geordi still felt that it was strange circumstances that led to his death. He seems to, at one point, accept the death by splitting up all of Data's belongings.
Yes.
But then goes back to not accepting it. I think that actually Geordi wanted something of Data's, and he was just pretending he thought he was dead to get something.
So really, all it's between is a little model of Tasha Yar and some poker chips.
He really doesn't have a lot of belongings, does he? He doesn't even have a spanner. You know, he's an android. He should have a spanner.
It would have been nice if, like, he had just had the corpse of Lau sitting in the corner, maybe.
Captain, I use her as a clothes rack.
Oh, oh dear.
Do Data's quarters have a toilet?
I mean, presumably they do, but I guess everything's modular, so you can have what you want or you don't want to have.
Because if you think about it, there's going to be many different types of aliens, and not all of them would need a toilet.
Or they might need a completely different toilet. I mean, maybe it comes out the top of their head or something.
Well, then they have to do a handstand on the toilet.
I do just think the stuff on the Enterprise is kind of weird. It's sort of like, well, we've all moved on, essentially, as they do in the 24th century, except Geordi, who has a nightmare. The weirdest scene, I think, in a long time in Star Trek. It just... him having the nightmare dream sequence realization, sleeping in his bed, in his uniform, and his shoes, having a nightmare. He takes his visor off, but not his shoes.
Well, apart from Picard's dressing gown, and my God, how can we forget that? We've never seen any implication that most of the rest of the crew have any other uniforms, apart from when they've had to dress up for some kind of an away mission. Or gone on the holodeck.
Does he sleep in that all the time? And does he never wash? Does he just go from day to day keeping that same uniform on? Never changing? I presume everything is odor free in the future anyway, so maybe you don't need to.
Well, do they actually have closets in the future with clothes in and, drawers with clothes, or is everything replicated? And then they put the old things in the replicator and that matter is turned into the next uniform.
Do you know what? Let's start this at the beginning.
Yes.
I find this a really odd structure because obviously you have this sequence of Data loading the very sad looking shuttle set. I mean the tiny toy shuttle that Data is using to transport from Fazio's ship to the Enterprise. Shuttle called Pike. Probably not a good omen, to be perfectly honest.
I did notice it was called Pike. I did also notice that, as you say, the set looked quite sad. The shuttle door barely manages to close. It struggles to actually come back down again. It goes in increments. It goes a bit, then stops, then a bit more, then a bit more, then a bit more. And then it pulls around to the back with the boot of the shuttle with just these perfectly sized holes for the things that he's storing.
That was handy. I suppose maybe Geordi fitted the shuttle out especially because he's got nothing else to do.
I mean, considering how often they have these problems of diplomacy and trying not to offend people. Imagine turning up with that shuttle, you know exactly how much cargo you've got to pick up, and they turn around and say, well, we thought we'd give you an extra one for free. Oh, thanks. I can't take it. I can't fit it in. What on earth are you saying?
But I found this a really odd construction of the episode, because you have that sequence over there, and then you see them deactivating Data and them loading the stuff on, and then you see the shuttle explode, and then cut to credits. And it sort of seems like the better teaser would have been for the shuttle to explode and the audience not to know anything more, because that's a good sting, and we know as much as the crew at that point.
I think that it was a nice change of pace, actually. It would have been a bit more generic if it was just, oh, is Data dead? And then we find out 30 seconds later that he's actually alive. Whereas actually showing us that Data is fine and our crew think he's dead, that's different to what we've seen up to now.
I think the show's always had a bit of a problem with the mysteries anyway. All too often we've had episodes in the past where the central premise has been a mystery. And, oh, is it this thing? Yes. Yes, it is. And we've known straight away. I think it could work. It just needs to be played right, which I don't necessarily know that I'd have the confidence in the show to do so at this point, because it's fumbled it so many times in the past. If Data were to not reappear until halfway through the episode and it was played entirely straight, then maybe, yeah, I could go with that.
I suppose ultimately it doesn't matter, because given that this is what the episode's about, then I suppose having the audience in it, because we know Data's not going to get killed off in the first 2 minutes of an episode, but I just thought from a construction point of view, would a better teaser not have been, oh, what's happened to Data, for a minute as the credits run, rather than going, oh, Data's died and the crew are like, oh, no, I'm sure we'll work that out eventually.
If anything, I actually think Data's put in more peril with what we've seen, because we obviously know he's not going to be dead, whereas we now think he's in more peril because he's been kidnapped.
Yeah, that's a very good point. Ignore everything I've said up to this point in this episode. This very charismatic character, Fajo, it kidnaps Data. I really, really like Saul Rubinek. I think he is a good performer. I think he does that mixture of camp and sinister here. He would have been a good maze master on the Crystal Maze. I think I generally like this performance, which in the wrong hands could have been very poor. I think he's an interesting character. I don't like his costume, but that's another issue. I think the performance is suitably big.
Well, yeah, he does look like he's just come from the papacy. It's a very odd choice. What it looks like is Dan Aykroyd has recently done a stint in the Vatican. He's essentially playing that sort of collector character where you start to wonder, is there some sort of slight comment on some of the viewership of the programme, which is a perfectly fair enough thing to do. I mean, we've seen it in many other franchises, even comedy franchises. I mean, even say I'm Alan Partridge has an episode with an overly obsessive fan.
Yeah, there's absolutely that element. I mean, I don't think they're going to say that any fan is going to kidnap, say, William Shatner and put him in their collection.
I'd be surprised if somebody hasn't at least attempted it.
Well, I mean, do we know where Walter Koenig is?
Sadly, yes.
He's in your basement.
Well, no, just where he is doing the convention circuit.
He has a rarity though, because he's the only Chekhov.
Yeah. Oh god.
Not even his wig anymore. Even it abandoned him. You say that as if it's a sort of but it is obviously much more sinister than that. This is an abuser. This is someone who has no moral clarity. This is someone who is only in it for himself.
He definitely has the Web of Fear episode 3.
Are you saying this guy's Ian Levine?
Not until he has a meltdown on Twitter. Abuse.
So yeah, abuse is of course exemplified through his assistant / lover, Varia, who he treats very badly.
And it's never overplayed. It's explicit in the suggestion at times, but we don't see too much of it. I mean, obviously we'll see him threaten her life later on, and see him kill her, to be more precise. But you're right, there are darker suggestions there as well of beatings and possibly more. And you don't want to play on it too much. The suggestion is enough.
I think I like that in the performance, where you have this sort of friendly performance. Almost, you have this the visage of being nice until somebody disagrees with you or someone does something that upsets them, and you very much see how he manipulates the situation, and I think that's played nicely. The stuff with Data's clothing, and that has a very creepy sort of sexual undertone to it. It's like, I want you to wear this for me, I want you to sit in the chair, and it does seem like there is that element of really toxic male control there. It is very creepy. It makes me feel unclean.
And I will happily admit I've never forced a woman to sit in my chair.
Do you have a chair? Humble brag. Yeah.
Can I just say how odd it looks as well, having Data without the well, I was going to call it a nipple badge, but com badge, I suppose, is the correct term. It's just there's just something that looks very odd there with it not being there. You realise how much that offsets the look.
There's just that problem as well that every costume that they've ever done in this show is horrible. And so Data's just wearing a lycra purple boiler suit, and you just think, why? Is that what Fazio likes? It just seems so odd. Well, it is what he likes.
Well, his other uniform had been trashed in that terrible special effect. I mean, that has got to be up there for one of the worst effects we've seen in all 3 series so far, surely. It's so bad. So unbelievably bad.
I don't mind, because it's fairly insignificant, really. It's just someone doing an acid attack, which is timely. Yeah, Star Trek was way ahead of its time in seeing that thing would become common in the 21st century. I'm not saying it's a good thing. I'm just saying they had some foresight. Okay.
We don't get too much time to dwell on the terrible effect, though, because then we're into Geordie's nightmare, and then we're into an odd counselling scene.
The thing is, as well, with all that stuff on the ship, the investigation, the getting on with the mission, well, of course, Geordie, why don't you just continue in your spare time? None of us are that interested, really. There's that, but it doesn't come to anything. It's, oh, I found this thing out, which is a vital clue, but I'm not going to share that with anyone. I did miss this crucial fact, but it's sort of circumstantial. It doesn't actually take them anywhere. They don't proceed any differently because they've got that. So you can't help but feel any time you spent with Geordie doing that investigation was a colossal waste of time, because he doesn't make the crucial discovery which leads to Data's recovery. That is all part of the mission that they were going on anyway.
Yeah, but he gets a chance to really camp it up around the Enterprise in this episode. You watch him throughout. He's leaning in the door frames, he's hitching up his uniform around the crotch, he's going in for the Riker lean at some points when he's talking to Wesley.
We all get lonely, don't we?
LeVar Burton saw the script and went, "This is my time to shine. Out comes the crotch shots."
I didn't notice that, I'll be honest.
Well, it's one to go back to.
I've seen this episode a good few times and I've never noticed LaForge's crotch.
And you're too distracted by the fact that they give it maybe, less than 24 hours before they go, Jesus, Data's dead. I call his stuff.
You know what has been an interesting thing of late? They actually give every member of the main crew something to do, even if it's just a minor little line. We don't tend to really have them just stand around and not do anything in the background.
That is true. The best strand, actually, I think, is the stuff with Worf, which probably could have been given a bit more time. He's obviously promoted into Data's chair. I don't know if that's really... I always think Worf's good at shooting stuff because he's a Klingon. And maybe
you are a racist.
Exactly. But then it's like now he has to be operations manager, which seems to be, as far as I can tell, just organising shift patterns and then allocating resources at the little station.
Why can't a Klingon allocate shift patterns?
It just doesn't seem to be quite the same skill set as a security officer. and tactical officer. I don't know. Maybe I'm wrong, but
members of the security team need to sometimes be in specific places at specific times.
That's true. And I mean, he is wearing yellow, so presumably it's all one.
All yellow people are the same.
That's not what I'm saying. But he is part of the non-command structure, which, given he's now second officer...
Don't edit that out. Don't edit that so it's just me saying that.
So strand with Worf is he has twice now been promoted when people have died, and he's taken their place, which is an interesting idea, and I think you could probably do a whole episode about that. You could certainly spend more time on that than you did with Geordi, because I don't really feel I got much of what Worf thought about it, because you have that conversation with Councillor Troy basically being really harsh, and it's like, it's your fault they're dead, Worf, isn't it? Are you feeling guilty about that, Worf? Are you? You're stepping in and you're trying to do your duty the best you can. You'll never be as good as them though, will you, Worf? Data could do all those calculations. How do you feel about that, Worf? Are you feeling bad? Do you feel sad? Do you? Tell me, Worf. Then on to the bridge and move on with the episode.
I quite agree with you. It's a shame that we don't get more of that, because that's an interesting element that we don't really normally get. Because the way that Klingons are presented in this show, and I know that the writers probably think, hey, it's great, we're getting these real insights into this culture. And it's normally quite one note, really. And even the dealings with Worf are often quite one note, and there's just not a great deal to it. But actually, to take all of that and say, actually, this is just bluster, and they've suggested that before, but to actually have an insight into that, to really put forward a situation and say, no, it's front with Worf, and he's being thrown into this situation, and he's trying to cover it, but actually let's examine how uncomfortable he is with this, and maybe that's part of his integration into this crew. That would be a lot more interesting for me personally, and I'd even quite like to see that carry on, be the main thrust. Data's returned at the end, and then you sort of get a bit with Worf saying, no, of course not, I would have done this job better, but secretly actually being very pleased that Data's back, so on. I don't know, I don't write scripts, this is terrible, but yeah, I do feel it's a shame we don't get more of that.
You're right. It doesn't pay off, essentially, and a lot of the scenes in this episode I think feel a bit like, we could add this in to fill up some time. Geordi's nightmare, that bit with Worf, because if you're not going to pay it off, then it is just filler, essentially, and I would like the sort of the personal stakes, which I think you've got in all these situations, because you've got Geordi, who should be kind of grieving for his friend, and you've got Wesley not really understanding, and you've got Worf having to deal with being promoted for a fallen crewmate. But you just don't get enough exploration of any of that. And then they arrive at the planet, and they're like, oh, there's some stuff down there. And that isn't even a mystery, and it's just like literally the first thing they do when they get there is like, this is weird, and it's like, well, it's very easy to use this, to manipulate it, to make everyone think that this was a natural disaster, and it's like, well, it's clearly not that easy, because it's the first thing you noticed. And then they beam down to, I think, is a spa, lovely water and lighting, and they discover some shiny rocks with lights, a sort of sensory room. And it's just like, yeah, these are the rocks. What if this wasn't a natural disaster? And it's so perfunctory. That entire section is just nothing. And it's, well, let's go and find Data then. Okay.
Yeah, it lulls in the middle, doesn't it? And it only really kicks back up again with the escape. And it finds its footing again towards the end. I'm slightly disappointed with the weapon, though, because it's so talked up about how devastating a weapon is, and it's the most suffering you could inflict on another person, and they don't really carry that through.
Well, I think it kind of suffers in some ways. It's a bit like one of the modern blockbusters where you've got an interesting first act, you've got that middle lull, and then you've got the big third act where you've got to actually remember that you've got to have some action, something happening. And the idea of just a man keeping Data in a room is that's quite interesting to me. Someone trying to manipulate someone else. But then you've got to kind of have the action set piece, and it's like, well, I'm going to keep my very dangerous gun in this room with you, in this safe. But then you don't even get Data using a superpower of breaking all codes. You just get someone turning. And that's the catalyst. You get someone going against the bad guy, someone from within, and helping Data. And then you've got, I think, the slowest escape of all time. We've got to get here, and then we've got to press these buttons, and then I've got to do this sequence over here, and then the guards are going to come, and then I'm going to give them 5 minutes for Fagio to get here. And you just think, oh my god.
It was very strange that Fagio enters and Data doesn't notice for at least 30 seconds.
It does feel very... Nothing seems to arise naturally, I don't think. Just the way it's staged. Even that line of, they've got that gun in the room, and then the other line is, I always sleep with a gun under my pillow, just so we know we've got multiple of these terrible guns.
But it is saved by the ending. That's the weird thing. It's really redeemed by what happens at the end. The whole... Well, I don't want to overplay it, actually, because the whole idea of did Data fire the gun or not is interesting, and that's a nice thing to hang it on, but they're a little too clear for my liking that, yes, he did.
He definitely fired the gun because O'Brien had to deactivate the gun.
Yeah.
The whole thing, I don't know, even him saying out loud, I cannot allow this to go on, as well. Maybe you need that. Maybe you need that indicator. But then why does he lie about it? That ambiguity. Does Data attempt murder, essentially, with this horrible gun that kills you more slowly than any phaser? It takes a good 3 seconds to kill you rather than the 1 second of vaporization that the modern phaser gives, which is why it passes the Federation weapons test in 5 out of 6 bench tests. I don't really know. I don't know if I like that ending even. Like, does Data attempt to kill the guy or not? It just feels like a point of ambiguity just to go, oh, a twist at the end, rather than for any reason. I don't know what that really brings.
I kind of think it is built up to, because the whole episode, the way that it's gone through, is how far will Data just sit back and resist. So I kind of feel it's building to that. I just feel it's marginally fumbled from what I would have liked. I would have liked it to not be so clear cut, and just for you to draw your own conclusions. I don't know.
That's what they've said behind the scenes. They wanted it to be ambiguous. It's not. I like Data trying to kill somebody. We need more of Data being a horrific murderer.
That's what we end up saying at the end of so many episodes.
If Star Trek Insurrection, of course, had started an extra 15 minutes earlier, you would have seen Data horrifically slaughtering the inhabitants of that planet.
Oh, that would have been maybe a better film.
I like Insurrection.
I like Insurrection as well, but I've got to be mean on the podcast. Yeah, so that wraps it up. I think an episode with good things and an episode that sort of meanders along. It's fairly average, but it's an episode that's about something. I give it credit for that. Actually, I was surprised how much I liked it, because I think I remember this being one that was damaged by a really irritating central performance, and in fact, I don't think it does have that. So Yeah, I think it's decent, but I don't think it quite lives up to its potential, perhaps.
No, I'd agree. Essential performance, one of the better things. Just perhaps it needed something else because it's stretched a bit thin.
I liked the man with the 3 nostrils.
I mean, we didn't really talk about that, but again, it's so insignificant. It's just like
Cocaine is a terrible drug.
He put his finger into one of the nostrils as if that was the normal, comfortable position.
Well, maybe that's right.
Maybe that's where he goes to the toilet.
What, was he holding it in?
Well, it would be rude to just, let it out in that room.
That would mean that when you had a cold and your nose ran, that it would be the equivalent of diarrhea streaming down your face.
Well, on that note, let's visit Quickfire.
Quickfire.
Brent Spiner would act against Saul Rubinek when he guest starred in his show Warehouse 13 as Brother Adrian, a recurring guest star, during season 4.
I'm assuming that they just filmed an extra bit with Denise Crosby when they were doing Yesterday's Enterprise, because if they got her in just for this bit, wow, what a sad state of affairs.
Would you believe that is the same footage as used in Skin of Evil at our little holodeck funeral?
Oh, is it really? Okay, right, that makes more sense.
She's a little statue on Data's quarters.
She's in Measure of a Man, so I assume it's the same effect from that.
In a scene which was scripted but not filmed, Fazio sends Varia to test Data's sexual abilities. I'm not sure about abilities, like, how long he can last, what positions he can attempt. I think that's good. That wasn't in the episode.
That's a very good thing. This is a family show. Kidnapping is okay. Insinuating assault, okay. But testing sexual ability, not okay.
Is that a note from Gene?
I want to test the actors personally.
Production was disrupted on this episode as British actor David Rappaport, originally cast as Fazio, attempted suicide during filming. Sadly, he later lost his life. Michael Piller remarked at the time, "We had to recast and reshoot, and we're lucky to get a good actor. I'm pleased with the way the script came out. It was rather sick character he's playing, but fascinating." So that's sort of sad.
Well, we know it's very sad because Rick Berman related. Of course, it left us very sad.
Now, we said that, the episode has its lulls, but we did say that it has some memorable moments. So I thought let's turn to the Nitpicker's Guide, and specifically their Great Lines section to see if we agree that this is one of those standout moments. The quote that they have picked for this episode as the best line of the episode is, "Perhaps something occurred during transport." Great line, guys. Great bloody line. Do you ever feel like you've wasted 99p?
Well, we're all off to polish our collections, as we like to say. Next time we will be talking about Sarek, behind his back as well. Until then, goodbye.
Goodbye.
Goodbye. For a moment, I thought you were insinuating that Geordie had a closet and was hiding deep inside it.
They did want Geordie to be gay at one point.
Who did?
The makers. They originally wanted him to be gay, but they decided blind was better.
As far as Geordie knows, he is gay at this point.
No, he likes Leia Brahms.
He's a whole different sexuality.
holosexual,